everyone, well done on completing your assessments. I've finished marking them and we'll be releasing your marks very shortly via Turnitin, so you'll be able to see them on Views within the next 24 hours. Now I wanted to give you some general feedback on your assessments before you got your marks to give you an idea about where you can improve for next time. Overall, the assessments were mostly well done. To start off with Assessment 1, where you had to do your extended response. There were sections in there where you were being specifically marked on describing the model and the key features of the model, and then critiquing and applying them to your article. Most of you described the model quite well and then went on and chose the key features of the article well that represented those parts of the model. But then when you're being asked to critique, that's where a lot of people tended to lose marks. So when you're asked to both describe and critique, it's important that you focus your word count on the critiquing section, because that's typically more difficult and it's the part of the discussion that you're expected to go into in detail. When you're critiquing things, you need to make sure that you critically evaluate. You compare and contrast, whether it's different models or it's different aspects of your article. You need to go into more detail. You all seem to understand the models quite well, and like I said, they were described well and applied fairly well. In terms of your second assessment task, the small literature review, the thing where most people fell down, and I was a little bit surprised about this, was the use of the research questions. Now, research questions are something that we put in a journal article or a lab report or any kind of scientific communication, and it's the overarching question that's guiding and driving the research. Now, research questions help to form studies' aims and their hypotheses. It doesn't mean that when you're asked to describe research questions to write an entire paragraph of questions. It means detail a couple of things that are going to describe the overarching themes of your research that you can draw on to generate hypotheses in the future. The other thing that needed to be done a little bit better was justifying rather than describing your search methods. So when you were asked to go on and detail how you were going to go about collecting your literature for your literature review in the future, a lot of you went, okay, I'll use this searching database, I'll use these keywords, etc., which was fine. That was the describing aspect. But where people lost marks was the justification aspect. So you needed to get into more detail and actually say why you were going to do that. Why was that the best method? Why was that method going to yield the best results and the highest quality evidence? So those are the specific pieces of feedback I have about Assessment 1 and Assessment 2. But I wanted to give you all some more general feedback on your overall academic writing style. Now, this is a master's course, so a higher level of academic writing is expected and is also required of you, because doing tertiary education and doing postgraduate education, you're expected to be able to improve your writing skills and be able to communicate effectively in a written fashion. Now, there's a lot of things that you guys can do to improve. So firstly, and this is a little bit of a pet hate of mine, you're enrolled in a course in Australia, so please use Australian English, not American English. This means that words like characterized are spelt with an S and not a Z. So it's really simple, just change the language settings in your word processing program that you're using so that you're using Australian English and not American English. Now, secondly, this seems really silly, and I feel a little bit silly for saying it to a master's course and master's students, but you need to spell check and proofread your work. Please do it. You're all using programs on the computer that can spell check for you. Just hit the button and go through it. It's so important. Some people had up to 4 spelling mistakes in one sentence. So please do it. It makes it so much nicer for your reader and it helps you develop as an academic writer. When you proofread your work, you need to do a few different things other than just looking for spelling errors. You need to go through and look for grammatical errors and for language errors as well. Now, for some of you, this might be a bit tricky or you're not sure what to look out for, and sometimes it's hard to improve when you don't have a good benchmark. So what I suggest you do is try reading your work aloud to yourself. If you can read it aloud and it makes sense to you, so think about each word carefully in the sentence. If it makes sense, that's great. But you'll find that if you've written something, especially if it's been in a bit of a hurry or you haven't read it a second time round, it won't make a whole lot of sense. So please go over it. The other things that you need to be doing are writing more formally. Now this doesn't mean you need to use bigger words, because I found that the tone was okay in that sense, but sometimes you guys were too informal. This comes down to using things like contractions. So for example, when you're saying don't or I won't do that and using words that are contracted, say do not, will not instead. Using apostrophes correctly, so you use them to show possession. That's so-and-so's thing, you'd have an apostrophe there. But you don't use apostrophes when words are plurals. Yes, there are the balls on the ground. There's no apostrophe there. You also need to be careful with your prepositions. So these are things like on, of, for, to, those kind of words. It sounds really simple, but quite often they're very tricky to use properly. So this is when reading your work aloud helps. Make sure that you're using your prepositions correctly. Otherwise your sentences don't make a whole lot of sense. So that's it in terms of the general academic writing stuff that I think everyone can really improve on. But other than that, what I want you guys to do is make sure that when you're using the assignment templates, you use them properly. I was glad to see that everyone used them and filled out the header and footer correctly. But what you need to do is make sure that you delete all of the highlighted text and leave in exactly what's there for the non-highlighted text. Don't abbreviate it or shorten it or delete sections, just leave it as it is so that everyone's assignment is exactly the same in terms of its formatting. Other than that, general formatting stuff like APA, that was fairly well done, but I think everyone can improve on their academic writing. So thanks very much for listening to your assignment feedback, and good luck finishing off the rest of your work for this week and last week as well if you haven't gotten around to it yet after your assignments were due. Remember that next week, week 8, is the intra-session break. So use that as an opportunity to catch up on your journal entries and your cuttings file if you haven't been making entries in those for a while. And then we'll talk again in week 9 when we'll have an online Collaborate session during that week. Talk to you soon. Bye.